I want you to picture your browser right now. You probably have, what, like 50 tabs open?
At least 50.
Right, at least. You've read 10 expert reviews, you've downloaded 3 white papers, and you're actively cross-referencing 2 different Reddit threads.
Oh, yeah, the classic rabbit hole.
Exactly. And by all traditional logic, you should be an absolute expert by now.
Yeah.
But instead, you just feel completely paralyzed.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal paradox. I mean, we are operating under this deeply ingrained assumption that if you just, gather enough data points, the confusion will naturally give way to understanding.
But that is just not happening. And if
Yeah.
you're listening to this right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're someone who doesn't just skim the surface.
Yeah.
You genuinely put effort into understanding the world.
Right. You want to get it right.
Yeah. But lately, trying to be well-informed feels like dragging a boulder up a hill. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack exactly why that happens. We are looking at one incredibly potent source text today.
It's really good.
It is. It's this short manifesto titled, Why Everything Online Feels So Hard Even When You're Doing Everything Right.
And, I mean, that title just nails the fundamental tension, right? This text argues that the digital ecosystem has completely decoupled effort from reward.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, we've been conditioned to believe that if we just push harder, if we just read one more article, things will get easier. But the source text suggests the exact opposite is true right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the text begins with a diagnosis that it shifts the spotlight in a very uncomfortable, but I think necessary way.
Yeah, it really does.
Because usually when we feel that profound mental exhaustion after researching something online, our first instinct is to internalize it.
Totally.
We think, I must not be smart enough, or I just don't have the discipline to focus anymore.
Which, by the way, is a completely natural psychological response. When an outcome doesn't match the input, we assume the input, meaning our effort, was flawed.
Right. But the text aggressively pushes back against that.
Yeah.
It explicitly states that this mental exhaustion is not a lack of discipline.
No.
And it's not a lack of cognitive ability. Capable, thoughtful people are putting in genuine effort, and they're still hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
But I actually have to push back on the text a little bit here.
Oh, really? Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I hear what it's saying about the environment, but let's be real. Isn't that letting us off the hook a bit too easily?
How so?
Like, I'm the one clicking the bait, right? I'm the one
Exactly.
falling down the rabbit hole at 2 in the morning.
Mm.
At what point is it a structural flaw of the internet, and at what point is it just my own lack of impulse control? I mean, shouldn't a disciplined mind just be able to power through it?
Well, that is the logical assumption, right? Assuming you're operating on a neutral testing ground.
Okay.
But what's fascinating here is how the text breaks down the asymmetry of the environment. It pivots the blame entirely by arguing that you aren't lacking discipline. You are fighting a system that is engineered to exploit your discipline.
Exploit it. Wow.
Think about it. You're bringing the academic rigor of a library to an environment designed like a casino floor.
Oh, man. That's bleak.
It is. You can be the most disciplined person in the world, but if you apply that discipline to a system designed to just keep you spinning the wheel, your effort works against you. The text says verbatim, it's the environment itself.
It's the environment itself. That reframes the entire struggle. So it's not that my cognitive legs are failing. It's more like I'm trying to run a marathon on a track that's actively pulling me backward.
Precisely. It's a treadmill running in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that the internet is a backward-moving track, it's not just about, feeling better about yourself.
Yeah.
It is a required mechanical step. Because as long as you blame your own willpower, you'll just keep trying to run faster on the treadmill. To actually find clarity, you have to understand the physics of the treadmill.
Right. But the feeling of mental exhaustion, it isn't just some abstract concept. What actually breaks our understanding, like mechanically?
Well, the text lays out the internet's reward system. It identifies 3 specific mechanics that drive this entire environment: speed, volume, and visibility.
Speed, volume, visibility.
Exactly. And the crucial contrast the text makes is that none of those 3 metrics have any correlation with actual understanding.
Wow.
In fact, they're almost always antithetical to it.
Okay, let's really drill down into these mechanics because I think this is the core of it. Let's start with speed.
Sure.
Because on the surface, getting information instantly sounds like a massive advantage, right?
Right.
Why does the text argue that speed is a toxic variable for the thoughtful learner?
Because true understanding requires friction.
Friction.
Yeah, it requires a pause. Think about the underlying architecture of almost every platform we use.
Yeah.
It is optimized to completely minimize friction.
Right, the infinite scroll.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The half-life of a piece of information online is incredibly short, which means you are incentivized to consume a headline, react, and then immediately scroll to the next input because the feed is already updated.
There is literally no built-in pause for digestion.
None. Zero. When you are rushing to keep up, your brain is essentially stuck in a state of rapid triage.
Triage, like in an ER.
Yes. You're just deciding what to look at next rather than connecting what you just looked at to what you already know. Speed is the currency of the environment. But making a nuanced decision requires you to sit with an idea, to turn it over, cross-reference it internally.
And the digital environment actively punishes that pause by burying the content and moving on.
Exactly. If you blink, it's gone.
Which means speed alone shatters your focus. But speed alone isn't what causes that total mental paralysis we were talking about earlier. What actually breaks your understanding is what that speed is delivering. Which brings us to the second mechanic, right?
Relentless volume.
Relentless volume, yeah.
And this is where the biological limits of the human brain just violently collide with algorithmic scale.
Okay, explain that.
The text makes a point that the environment equates quantity with quality. The whole architecture rewards the hoarding of data points.
Right, but how exactly does that volume create the paralysis? Like, why doesn't having 200 data points make me twice as informed as having 100 data points?
Because of how working memory functions.
Okay.
Human working memory can hold roughly 4 to 7 discrete items at a time. That's it.
Just 4 to 7.
Yeah, it's very limited. To build an understanding of a complex topic, your brain has to hold the foundational context in its working memory while it processes new incoming data.
Right, you need a foundation to build the house.
Exactly. But when the feed pushes 50 contextless data points at you every minute, your cognitive RAM is constantly overwriting itself.
Oh, wow.
Your brain literally has to drop the foundational context just to make room for the new input.
So you aren't building a structure at all.
Yeah.
You're just constantly swapping out the bricks.
Yes. You aren't going blind. Your processing power is just being completely short-circuited. The text gives a chilling warning about this exact dynamic. It states, and I'm quoting here, "The more information you consume, the harder it becomes to see clearly."
The harder it becomes to see clearly. I really want to visualize that mechanism because I think it's vital.
Let's do it.
It's like, imagine you're trying to evaluate a massive, complex painting, right?
Okay.
But instead of letting you stand back and look at the canvas, the internet is shooting the individual pixels at your face out of a t-shirt cannon.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, you're catching a lot of pixels, like high volume, high speed. But you have absolutely zero spatial awareness of how they connect to form an actual image.
That is a perfect mechanical description. The volume directly creates the blindness. You just have a handful of disjointed pixels.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, we have to look at the third mechanic of this reward system, which is visibility.
Right, speed, volume, and visibility.
And the text points out that the environment is hyper-focused on being seen rather than being correct or thoughtful.
I feel like this might be the most frustrating part for someone who is genuinely just trying to find the truth.
Oh, absolutely. Because it completely flattens the information hierarchy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the algorithms that dictate what information gets put into that t-shirt cannon you mentioned, they do not possess a metric for factual accuracy or nuance or depth.
They don't care if it's true.
No, they strictly measure engagement, what keeps you on the platform. And outrage, oversimplification, extreme polarization, those are highly engaging.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Therefore, the information optimized for an immediate emotional reaction is the information that achieves visibility. So in your feed, a peer-reviewed study and a completely unhinged, emotionally charged rant occupy the exact same visual space.
So the platform just doesn't differentiate, it just tracks the clicks.
Correct. The algorithm only sees engagement, so those pixels hitting you from the cannon,
Yeah.
they aren't even an accurate representation of the painting. They're just the brightest, most jarring pixels available.
Man, when you lay out the mechanics like that speed, cognitive RAM overriding via volume, and visibility prioritizing outrage over nuance, it paints a pretty tragic picture for the thoughtful learner.
It really does.
Like, think about the person listening right now. They are showing up to this environment with an earnest desire to grasp a complex topic. Maybe they're trying to make a difficult medical decision or understand a geopolitical conflict.
Heavy stuff.
Exactly. And the system essentially hands them a megaphone, a stopwatch, and a fire hose.
It's a complete misalignment of goals. The people who care the most about getting the nuanced answer are the ones who suffer the most cognitive strain because they're in an environment designed for immediate, shallow reactions.
Yeah. And the heaviest truth here, and honestly, the most interesting pivot in the source text, is how it reframes the psychological toll of that misalignment. It makes a very astute observation about how thoughtful people interpret this friction. They end up feeling like they're falling behind.
Because everyone else seems to have an immediate, confident opinion.
Right. Everyone else is screaming their opinion, and you're still reading.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The text addresses that exact feeling of inadequacy. And it says, but you're not falling behind. You're just operating with a different standard.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can map the exact coordinates of why you feel stuck. You are experiencing the violent collision of two incompatible standards.
Incompatible.
Totally incompatible. The internet's standard measures success by velocity and accumulation. Like how fast can you react and how much data can you consume. But your standard, assuming you're looking for structural truth, is based on comprehension and accuracy.
And you just cannot achieve structural truth at the speed of an algorithmic feed.
You cannot. They are mutually exclusive. I mean, it takes milliseconds to consume a sensational headline, right?
Yeah.
But it takes hours to verify its underlying data. So when you feel like you are moving too slowly or, that you're paralyzed by indecision while the rest of the internet just moves on, it is vital to recognize that you are only failing to keep up with the internet standard.
Which brings to mind a really interesting way to look at this. It's like, imagine you were trying to play a deep strategic game of chess.
Okay.
But the environment around you is a massive tournament of speed checkers.
Oh, that's good.
Right. Everyone is slamming pieces down. They're shouting. They're moving instantly. And you're sitting there studying the board.
Yeah.
And the whole room is yelling at you to just make a move.
And you feel like you're failing.
Exactly. But you aren't bad at the game. You are just refusing to play the simplistic high-speed version that the room demands.
Your hesitation isn't a glitch. It is a feature of your rigor.
A feature of your rigor. I love that.
You are refusing to move until you actually understand the structural mechanics of the board. The feeling of being stuck is actually a healthy byproduct of holding yourself to a standard that the environment refuses to support.
Wow. Okay, so we have diagnosed the mechanics of the backward-moving treadmill. We understand why the volume of data is actively overriding our cognitive RAM. And we've established that feeling slow is actually proof of high standards.
Yeah.
But diagnosis isn't a cure.
Right, you still have to navigate it.
Exactly. How do we practically navigate this? Because the source text proposes a specific paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And it requires actively doing the exact opposite of what the internet demands.
Yes, it does. It requires an aggressive rejection of the internet's default state. And the internet's default state is accumulation.
Right. The text concludes with this amazing directive. It says, the real shift isn't learning more. It's learning how to evaluate what you're seeing. Evaluation over accumulation.
This is the operational core of the manifesto. When you are lost online, your instinct is to accumulate.
Open another tab.
Exactly. Open a tab, find another source, catch more pixels from the canon. But accumulation under these conditions just accelerates the blindness. Evaluation requires stepping completely out of the blast zone of that t-shirt cannon.
Let's define what that looks like in practice. Because I think people mistake evaluating for just, reading more carefully.
Yeah, it's not that.
No, the text implies a structural change in behavior. If accumulation is gathering raw material, evaluation is building the refinery.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. Evaluation is a filtering mechanism. It is the conscious decision to stop acquiring new data points and begin interrogating the ones you already have.
Stop acquiring. That's so hard to do.
It is, but it means recognizing that your attention and your working memory are finite resources. The algorithm is designed to extract those resources endlessly. Evaluation is the act of aggressively protecting them.
It's the difference between hoarding puzzle pieces from 50 different boxes because it feels like progress.
Which is volume.
Right. Versus stopping, looking at the 5 pieces you already hold, and asking, do these actually fit together? Like, who made these pieces? What is the actual picture on the box here?
Exactly. The text emphasizes that the ultimate goal is moving forward with clarity, not confusion. And it insists that this clarity only comes from understanding what actually matters.
Which you can't do if you're drowning in volume.
You simply cannot determine what matters when your cognitive RAM is constantly flooded with new input. Stepping away from the feed to evaluate is not a retreat. It is an active information triage. You have to discard the 99% of noise to even have a chance of processing the 1% a signal.
Which poses a really stark question for you, the listener, as you navigate your day today. How much of your time online is spent frantically gathering raw material versus actually sitting in silence offline, refining what you gathered?
A very uncomfortable question for most of us.
Seriously. But if the ratio is heavily skewed toward gathering, the paralysis is inevitable.
And the environment will always push you to gather more, because gathering generates data. And data is what the platform monetizes.
Right.
Evaluation happens entirely within your own mind, which makes it invisible and highly unprofitable to the algorithm.
Wow. Evaluation is unprofitable to the algorithm.
Yeah.
That really crystallizes the conflict of interest here.
Completely.
So let's pull all of this together and summarize the structural realities we've uncovered for the thoughtful learner today. First, that crushing mental exhaustion you feel when researching a complex topic online. It is not a personal failure of discipline. You are engaging with a highly engineered system that actively works against deep comprehension.
Second, the internet's reward mechanics, speed, volume, and visibility, they function by exploiting your cognitive limitations.
Yeah.
The sheer volume overrates your working memory, creating that strobe light blindness, while visibility metrics prioritize engaging noise over nuanced truth.
And finally, the escape hatch. The only way to find your footing is to abandon the instinct to accumulate more information. You have to pivot to ruthless evaluation. Stop catching pixels, step back and look at the canvas.
And remember that your friction with the environment is a sign of your rigor. When you feel like you are falling behind, you are merely operating on a standard of truth rather than a standard of velocity.
I really want to reinforce that point because it is so vital. Your standard of nuance and correctness is not a weakness. Do not let an algorithm optimized for speed checkers convince you that playing chess is a flaw.
Your rigor is exactly what makes true understanding possible.
Which leaves us with one final fascinating thought to explore on your own. We've established that the internet's environment relies entirely on our participation in its game.
Right. It needs us to spin the wheel.
It desperately needs us to value speed and volume so the algorithm has data to process. But what happens to that environment if thoughtful people collectively decide to engage in information triage? What happens when we stop consuming the fire hose, stop clicking the bait to gather more, and really focus on slowly evaluating what actually matters?
It raises a profound question about the vulnerability of the system. I mean, if evaluation is unprofitable, does mass evaluation starve the algorithm?
It's a powerful idea. Does the environment eventually have to alter its mechanics to meet our standard if we absolutely refuse to lower our standard to meet it?
Something to think about.
Definitely. So the next time you find yourself paralyzed by 50 open tabs, overwhelmed by the volume, remember, you don't need another data point. You just need to close the laptop, step out of the blast zone, and evaluate the pieces you already hold.